Okay, and I'm going to do the audio sync here. 3, 2, 1. Should do it, I think.
All right.
So, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, welcome to our inaugural podcast for the South Dakota State Railroad Museum. I'm Rick Mills, the curator, and our very capable assistant is James Wilmus. He's running the board today, or the computer, whichever you prefer. And we just want to welcome you to what we hope is going to become kind of a tradition here and a series of different looks at what's going on with railroads in South Dakota, not only here in the Black Hills, but across the state, and just to bring in some special guests once in a while so we can learn a little bit more about not only the history, but some of the actual operations that are going on now. Just some other fun stuff that might be of interest to you. We're going to have some other short segments of folks coming in and talking a little bit about maybe even some of the things going on even here in Hill City or other areas that are of interest around the state. We do travel around and talk to different folks at train shows, not only here in South Dakota, but in other areas. But yeah, then we also go to different history conventions, and we're going to just give you a variety of things that may be of interest to you, because they are of interest to us. And so that's kind of the gist of what we intend to do. One thing that has been suggested already is just to kind of give you an overview of myself a little bit, if you folks aren't familiar with me, and I'm not sure why you would be unless maybe you have some of my books or whatever, but I am a native of western South Dakota. I've loved trains and been interested in history pretty much all my life. Fifth generation of western South Dakota, and as curator of the State Railroad Museum, I get to do a lot of things that I really love, involving history as well as railroading, and of course as operating the South Dakota State Railroad Museum year-round, and then especially during the summer here in Hill City next to the 1880 train, we get to visit with a lot of interesting people and hear a lot of good stories. I feel very blessed to be in this position, and I just welcome you to send any emails to me based on this conversation or anything else related to the South Dakota State Railroad Museum to sdsrrm@gmail.com. And that's sdsrrm@gmail.com. Now, if you want to go on our website, which has just been revamped and reintroduced, it's sdsrrm.com. sdsrm.com, and that'll give you more information. But we have been here 15 years now, which is really surprising to me, but yet it's not surprising. It's gone by so quickly, and we have a great board of directors that represents many areas of the state of South Dakota, and also gives me something to work with as far as input and guidance as to how to make this museum even better every single day. And I can't thank those board members enough for all the work and all the input that they give me. And I guess, I look at it as giving back, in some way, because here at the museum in Hill City, we have thousands of visitors every year, and so many of them are from out of state, and they don't know a lot about South Dakota, and we like to give them even more than just railroad history, because so much of South Dakota's history was based on railroad development and everything. So it's fun to actually throw more things into our presentations here at the museum, not only about trains, but also, how they related to our history, how our culture developed, how our politics developed, how our business culture developed, and so many things were influenced by trains. Um, that's nationwide. It really is. But I mean, here in South Dakota, we have the perfect venue here in Hill City next to the 1880 train to tell that story. Um, the museum itself was incorporated back in 1994 by a group of folks from the Hill City area that thought it'd be nice to have a railroad museum here in Hill City next to the 1880 train, which made perfect sense. We talked to folks from around the state, and we gathered a lot of input, and it was finally recognized that Hill City would be the place to start this museum. We did. I was very fortunate. I applied for the job of director / curator, and I was voted in to do that, and it's been a great learning experience. Learning about how nonprofits operate and how they are governed was a steep learning curve for me, and I had incredible volunteers and board members and other community members from around the state that volunteered and helped us put this together. And I just, I couldn't have done it without them. Luckily, with my background with railroad history, writing several books on railroad history, and just knowing a lot of folks around the state that were so knowledgeable, I thought we really put together a pretty strong package. Could we have done better in certain areas? Oh, definitely. Nothing ever goes the way you plan it. And, but just the input and the friendships that I have developed, and hopefully I've shared some of my passion for the trains of South Dakota and just railroading in general, plus the people that made the railroads operate, the employees. Some of the greatest people I've ever met, and they were the backbone of not only the railroad operations but also of the state, and a lot of that is reflected in what we have here at the museum. We tell stories. That's our job, and I just I would have a really tough time picking one of my favorites, out of that, because there are just so many, and we've documented some, not all of them, because it's almost impossible to do that, with the staff and the the limited time that we have to do these types of things. We do our best, but once again, I will mention numerous times, what makes us go are our members, and especially our volunteers. That is so critical. And, memberships obviously are what power this museum. Memberships, financial support, folks coming in, doing donations of railroad memorabilia, railroad, paper, just, locks, lanterns, model trains. It's just, it's almost hard to relate all of this information as to what makes South Dakota's railroad special and what is a good thing to use for interpretation. I just, we find ways to interpret things that I would have never guessed were or would be possible or would be something that would be usable as far as being able to interpret history. Almost everybody has their own feeling on what is important in railroading, and we use that to our advantage. And we, of course, travel around the state doing talks through the South Dakota Humanities Council, as well as other local and historical conventions. and it's the variety is nearly endless. But we find interesting ways to tell stories, and the state railroad system was such a unique opportunity for railroads to not only build railroads in the prairies, in the foothills, in the higher Black Hills, and to accomplish so many different tasks in their heyday and when they were built. Agriculture, without a doubt, could not have developed in South Dakota without the railroads. Mining in the Black Hills, logging in the Black Hills, other types of industry and business and commerce, businesses across the state, catalog houses. That's when the Sears and Roebucks and the J.C. Penney's developed and then shipped products from the catalog houses of the East and other retailers and businesses by rail to the homesteaders and every person out here in Dakota. It's a phenomenal way of life. It was, still is, because the railroads have not gone away. A lot of them have, but so many of them are still here doing the job 130, 140 years later than when they were first built. Things have changed, but the railroads are still doing what they are best at doing. Hauling commodities, hauling people, not so much here. And of course, that's another whole subject we'll get into in another topic about the potential of having Amtrak in South Dakota again. But back in 1872, the first railroad was built into what is now South Dakota, and that was the Dakota Southern. Came into Yankton, and of course, Yankton at that time was the territorial capital, and it stimulated the economy of southeastern South Dakota, as well as every other area that rails started to get developed into in the 1870s. By the early 1880s, there were railroads all over what is now eastern South Dakota, and they were developing the commerce and what became known as the Great Dakota Boom. Agriculture was just going absolutely gangbusters. By then, the early 1880s, there were starting to be a few narrow gauge railroads in the Black Hills to develop the mining. And that became a whole nother industry and that's probably something that later on we'll talk about, nothing but the mining railroads. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And James, I want to bring him in too on this because he started out as a volunteer when he was in high school, and he has stuck through all of my stupidity and whims and rantings and everything else.
It's almost like a marriage, really.
Yes, it is. It is. Well, I always say there's no I in team because, yeah, and now that he has come back to South Dakota after college and is teaching at Ulrich's High School and just is helping so much with what we're doing here at the museum, including getting this podcast going. It's amazing. But I digress a little bit because we were talking a little bit about, the way South Dakota's railroads developed. But I mean, I talk about how many ways we can portray this. I mean, history to a lot of people is dry and dull and everything else. But trains, there's something fascinating about them. They've always been big and loud and everything else. And I don't know about you, James, but I mean, I find it hard to find new adjectives about why trains are still relevant and why they're still fun.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. You know how far in we are into the podcast yet?
I don't know.
15 minutes.
15?
Yep.
My gosh, boy. Well, I've been told that my mouth runs right on.
No, that's okay, though. I think this is one heck of an introduction. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the one and only Rick Mills. He's an author, a historian, and you can tell about his passion for railroading and his energy for history. So, this is part of the reason. Let's see. You had been thinking of a podcast before, right?
Yeah, I wanted some kind of a new vehicle that could complement our website, or just go on YouTube or whatever, that would tell our story in new ways.
Yeah,
and I mean to new generations. And this makes sense for us. It really does, because there are so many ways we can incorporate video, we can incorporate digital photos, we can incorporate interviews with people who were there and remember it, or have family members. My gosh, it's a great way for us to do this.
Yep. Well, so I do hope everybody who's watching this has enjoyed the introduction here. So I think, Rick, you've made a very fine point as far as just how important railroading is to our state and its history. Now, before we get into the history proper, I think we are going to go over time a little bit, aren't we? But that's okay.
This one might go over a little bit.
That's okay. You know what? We can go crack a couple of cold ones maybe, and we'll have it 3 hours long. Would be like Joe Rogan, but on a small scale.
No, I'm not going to compare myself.
No, okay.
Okay, you can go for Joe.
I'll go for Joe. How about that?
Fair enough.
So, about a few months back, I had also brought up the idea of a podcast to Rick and some of our other board members, and they liked the idea, especially since Rick had it before. One thing we were missing, though, was the ability to get that project off the ground. So what you're witnessing here is the fruit of those efforts. So we got ourselves a couple of nice mics this morning from Walmart.
Yeah. Hey, we spared no expense.
Yes, we spared no expense. They are good mics, trust me on that. I got my cameras that's fly on the wall. I'm hoping that if this becomes a regular thing, we're going to have our own 3-camera setup, couple of lights, whatever, so it's not just going to be you guys staring at just us the whole time. We'll be able to bring up photos, we'll be able to bring up videos, and really I think the strength of this podcast is going to be telling all kinds of stories related to South Dakota Railroad history, and maybe history in general. I mean, sky's the limit for us. I don't know what else we got in the state that's like this exactly.
Well, I'll tell you what, it is unique, and I think that's our goal, is to make it unique, so that you're not sitting there going to sleep in your recliner. Yeah. Because I could do that for you, but I mean, I want to make this exciting. And anyway, and James has made it possible.
And there's another exciting development there. We could have you read your books as an audio format. Put it on a Patreon or something.
Yeah, no kid. No, that would put people to sleep.
That would put people to sleep. But you know what? That's popular these days.
That's right. This could be white noise for folks.
Yeah. So, Rick, before we get into the history of South Dakota railroads, let's get into the history of Rick Mills. So how did this whole thing start for you?
I mentioned that I'm 5th generation South Dakotan. I grew up in eastern Custer County, on the east slope of the Black Hills. Both my grandparents on the Mills side and also on the Crosby side, down by near Underwood, they came out to Homestead by rail in the late 1880s, early 1890s. So I mean, I've been out here. I did have several members of my family that worked for the railroads. And so I grew up with a very strong appreciation for history, because both of my grandparents, Mills and Crosby, were very into history, because they were ranchers, farmers, mail carriers, and everything else. They appreciated history. And I picked that up. One of my stories that my dad always told was that before I could speak, I was jabbering and pointing when I saw a train. So he always said, I knew there was something wrong with you then.
And the tradition continues.
So it's just, it's a great hobby. I've been into it. I've written 8 books, co-written 4 others. We've done a couple here for the museum since we opened in 2010. When I was in my real life, I call it. I worked for a printing company in Rapid City for 10 years. Then I also worked for 10 years as the editor and photographer for Visitor Magazine. And of course, then that was promoting tourism in the Black Hills as well as history and everything else. So throughout my, what I would say, career, I did a lot of things that trained me for this. And then, of course, that combined with my love of history and everything. Like I said, I'm blessed to have this job, and I have a passion for it. So it's a good combination, and it's something that other people can definitely get behind and enjoy.
Well, now you can add radio/podcast host there
how
on your
about
resume.
That's right. That's right.
Still adding new things to it.
That's right.
So now we're a bit into the 21st century, although I'll tell you what, when I was down in Colorado for a couple of years, I thought it was interesting that I'd go into a museum there, and then I'd mention my volunteer work up here in Hill City, and immediately people are like, "Oh, well, how's Rick?" That's
Well, that gratifies me. That I've been very fortunate in my life. I've been able to do things that I always dreamed of doing, as far as promoting railroads, promoting their history and everything. And it is a tight-knit group of folks that work with museums and railroad historical societies and stuff. So I learned from them for a lot of their things that we have done. And I hope that they've learned a few things from me too. And it's a community. It's a wonderful group to work with.
Yeah, well, and I can certainly concur with that. So, still remember coming in from high school there, and I had the mom decided I needed volunteer work, so she said, "Well, there's this railroad museum up in Hill City,
yeah,
and it's ran by this guy named Rick Mills." And I remember thinking for a little bit, then I thought, "Who's Rick?"
Who is Rick?
Who?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. That was one of our big goals when we started, or I would say one of my goals, that I wanted to make sure that we were giving back to the communities, but especially to younger kids. And, whether it be, ones that wanted to do model train work, or were just interested in trains and learning more about, some of them wanted to get into railroading as a career. And I mean, we were able to do that because we blended not only real railroaders that came in and were interested in what the museum was doing, but also just bringing everybody together. And, if they like trains, this was the place for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's definitely been a situation of build it and they will come, because what do we got now for volunteers here? So we've had, let's see, Jordan come in about the last 3 years on and off.
Yep.
Had
students from the School of Mines and Black Hills State. Yes.
I think you guys tried an internship now and then.
Yep.
Way back when.
We've had interns from South Dakota Tech. Yeah. So that's worked out very well.
And been making connections all over the state. Like, let's see, what railroads have you been reaching out to?
Oh my gosh, we have had donations and support from BNSF Railway. A certain amount of things have come into us from the Union Pacific, even though they don't operate in South Dakota anymore. The former Dakota, Minnesota, and Eastern, the DM&E, they are great supporters of us, or were at the time, but also their former employees still support us. The Rapid City Pier and Eastern. They, of course, are the former DM&E Canadian Pacific component. But then also, we have a lot of support from the Dakota and Iowa, the DNI, and the Everest companies out of Sioux Falls. The E&E Railroad, Ellis and Eastern, which is now or I should say the former Sweetman Construction out of Sioux Falls. And then also the Watco Company, which is based out of Mitchell now, and it is the former Dakota Southern, and they are called the Ring, Neck, and Western.
Yep.
And so, I mean, we work with a lot, if not all of in some respect, all of the operating railroads. And then, of course, we're located right next to the 1880 train here. And we, they are, of course, one of the 10 most popular tourist railroads in the United States. And we also work with Prairie Village out of Madison, and they have train operations too during the summer. So yeah.
And I think on the whole, quite good people. This whole community that's been built up, it's actually quite amazing to see.
And when you say community, I'll give a little more credit to the community of Hill City has just opened their arms to us, and we have been really enveloped by their support, and we feel a big part of it, and then also of the Black Hills tourism community and the state tourism community. We all have to work together. It's still a pretty small pond, and but we have established some wonderful connections, and we feel very, very blessed.
Yeah, very much so. So we got books surrounding us, big library, several of which got your name on it.
Yeah.
Then we got, let's see, right next to that 1880 train. That's where we're at. Like, we're right next to the parking lot of them. You can see the trains coming right by us.
Yeah.
If you come on into during this tour season when we're open.
Yeah.
All kinds of events in Hill City. Really, it's quite amazing. To the point I can't hardly even describe it in words, really. Just to be able to watch something like that develop over time. And I feel a little bad that I've had to go away for a while to see it at a distance. But, being able to come back years later.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about this. You can do what you are capable of doing from right here in Hill City or from a distance. When you were in college, you came back and you volunteered on time off. And everybody brings something different to the whole thing.
Yep.
Once in a while, I'll get an envelope from one of our members saying, "Oh, I just happened to see this at an auction or whatever. Can you use it?" Well, if you can't put it in the collection, sell it and make money to raise, awareness or something about the library, the model trains, whatever. Or just get it to a kid that likes trains. And if that's something that'll help them out, power to them.
Oh, yeah.
How can you not lose with that?
Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I do really feel like we can compete with Joe Rogan on this. We might only have 5 views and 3 likes, but we're going to grow it. Because I'll tell you what, I'm going to be going through this and editing, and we're just going to take little snippets of that on occasion, and really, if we cut out some pieces there, put them together, you got one hell of a speech going on.
Oh,
really.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't wear my tux today.
So you could do the 2-minute clip of why is community important, the 2-minute clip there of how you got to be on the with the museum, how you got started to being an author, that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
but I think so. We're about 28 minutes in right now, and I am going to say you can put up photos and other things. I'll have that museum website right there. That should all work out pretty good.
Yeah.
I think we should dedicate here a little bit of time to the subject of the day, shouldn't we? History.
History, yes.
So, why don't I ask a few key questions here? And then we're going to test your knowledge a little bit on this.
Oh, no.
Of course, I have
Stump the Ricky.
Yeah, except I have no way of checking it.
Oh, well, hey.
If I Googled it, it probably would use AI coming from one of your books anyway. So.
The circle has completed itself.
The circle of information is now finally complete.
Okay, let's try this.
Let's try it. So, let's just go, instead of East River, South Dakota, let's go a little bit more restrictive there in our scope. So, railroads crossing the Missouri River, that was a bit of a challenge, right?
It was an incredible challenge for not only just the physical, but the political and the cultural. The first railroad across the Missouri River into what is now South Dakota was in 1872, and that was the original Dakota Southern from Sioux City over to Yankton, which was completed in 1873. You go up the river a little bit further. You get the bridge went across to Milwaukee from Chamberlain across to the Black Hills, And that was in 1907. And then there was the one from Rapid City to Pierre, which was completed in 1907 as well. And then probably the most consequential one in United States history that went through South Dakota was the Missouri Bridge, where the Milwaukee Railroad built across and completed a line to Seattle in 1909. So there were those four that actually, completed the pattern of railroads that crossed the Missouri and South Dakota.
Right. Now, of course, at least three of those railroads were heading toward the Black Hills.
That's correct.
Of course, you had the Burlington coming up from the south at the same time as that. So, in the north part of the Black Hills, we got gold. Lots and lots of gold.
That's right.
We wanted to get our greedy little paws on it there.
That's right.
Especially everybody back east in Washington.
Yep.
So, who was the first to really win that race out here?
Well, win is maybe not the right word, but at least do it first. The first one in from the outside world was the Fremont Elkhorn and Missouri Valley Railroad that came up from northern Nebraska to Deadwood. It was completed into Deadwood City on December 29th, 1890. And that is more than ironic, if anybody knows their history. The other event that occurred the morning when the train was first going into Deadwood that morning was the Battle of Wounded Knee, or the Massacre of Wounded Knee, more accurately.
I was going to say, I think my students would take issue with that.
I know. Well, it depends on which way because really when you look at it, I mean, those two events happening at the very same time, I mean, there's just no more irony than that. It's just phenomenal. Anyway, then about a month later, the Burlington Railroad came up from the southern Black Hills, Edgemont, up through what is now the route through Custer, Hill City, and that is now, of course, the Mickelson Trail in South Dakota, and built into Deadwood in January of 1891. So once those two outside standard gauge locomotive railroads built into the northern hills, that completed that up there. But the whole northern hills were full of standard and narrow gauge railroads during the great mining era, which is basically from 1890 to 1930.
Let's see if I can hit those narrow gauge now that I've been going on about it for about a year, give or take. So you got the Black Hills and Fort Pierre. That was owned and operated originally by Homestake, right?
Correct.
Then you got Deadwood Central.
Yep.
Now, was that always a CNW operation, or was that a CB&Q operation?
That was a CB&Q operation after it was taken over in 1890. That right-of-way that they had built in 1888 between Deadwood and Lead actually was built as a narrow gauge. The standard gauge Burlington came in, put a third rail in, and that gave them access to Deadwood and to access the mine or the mills, the yards, everything else, the businesses of Deadwood. So within a couple of years, the Deadwood Central was taken over by the Burlington.
Sure.
As was the Black Hills and Fort Pierre.
Yep, and then of course we had the big logging operation,
the Warren Lamb lumber.
Warren Lamb.
That was out of Rapid City. That was partially narrow gauge, partially standard gauge. A lot of it ran along the right-of-way of what later became the Rapid City, Black Hills, and Western, the Crouch Line. And then also there was an extensive bunch of Warren Lamb lumber operations in what is now Custer State Park. Then there was narrow gauge built by the Fremont Elkhorn, Missouri Valley, later Chicago Northwestern in Lead and Deadwood, that whole area. I liken that to a bowl of spaghetti. When you look at the map, it's just every draw, gulch, valley, or whatever in the Black Hills that had any kind of mining in the northern hills had a railroad in it.
Wonder if we can get a map up on screen when you're saying that.
There are a few fairly good maps, but one of the things we want to put together here at the museum is a comprehensive Black Hills and later on a comprehensive South Dakota Railroad map that will detail all of this because it's phenomenal. It really, other than the narrow gauges in the Colorado Rockies, the Black Hills had an incredible amount of narrow gauge
Well,
operations.
in people, like, we're still considered the Midwest, even though, western side of the state, we're a little bit more Rocky Mountain area anyway.
Yeah,
But people, a lot of them don't realize there's a lot of narrow gauge just on the flatland country of the Midwest,
there
too.
is.
It's
There
a very
is.
common idea that, oh, well, they built narrow gauge because they could go around curves tighter and steeper grades and whatever. And to an extent, I think that's true.
To an extent, that's true. It was cheaper,
Yep.
and it was smaller, and it still did the job. And it didn't cost as much to get it into certain areas. Then it was very transitory. They could pull it out and then put it somewhere else. There's a lot of advantage. But yeah, it wasn't strictly just a mountain thing.
Yeah, and that's especially true with like the logging and the mining operations. You go in, log out an area, mine out an area, just pull it up, go somewhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was trying to think, like, even in Colorado, let's see, I think it was the Florence and Cripple Creek. After that went belly up, the equipment got sold off. A good chunk of that ended up in Montana as the Montana Southern. I believe that was 2 or 3 engines there and about 30 or 40 cars.
That's right. But if you look at the history of in Colorado, the Colorado and Southern, which was another subsidiary of the Burlington, received a lot of the narrow gauge stuff from the Black Hills when it was taken out of service in the 20s and up to 1930.
That's right, because that's a, let's see, engine 537, I think it was.
537 that ran on the CNS all the way up along the South Platte River and everything up into the mines that operated in Colorado till the late 30s.
Then we got to get into not just the narrow gauge, but the really narrow gauge. We got to really focus our attention on those too, just for a little bit.
Yeah.
So, Homestake.
Homestake.
The mining operations in Homestake, I think, were probably the most extraordinary part of this whole area when it comes to railroading.
The first steam locomotive in the Black Hills in western Dakota was freighted by bull train across from Bismarck, Dakota Territory, to Lead, Dakota Territory in 1879. They brought it across from a point on the Missouri River.
And I think I'm going to find... Is the photo in this one?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I think it's near the front somewhere.
Yep, and that engine now is on display at the Adams Museum in Deadwood. But anyway, that was brought across. The rails were brought across, and they built that in 1879, and then up until 1881, that was the only locomotive in the Black Hills, other than other ones brought in that were stationary locomotives used in the mining and milling. But yeah, and then that just kept expanding until the 1880s, and then mid to late 1880s, when the narrow gauges were replaced in certain places by the standard gauges. And so, but there was still narrow gauge being built, and like I say, that single first locomotive is still it's in existence.
Yep.
At the Adams Museum today.
And I'd venture to say that's one of the older locomotives in existence in the U.S. as well. Now, there's older ones, like the John Bull or something like that. Right.
But it was built in Philadelphia at the Baldwin Locomotive Works in 1879. And that's documented.
Yep. And as far as I'm aware, they're pretty much original parts on it, too.
Oh,
right?
Pretty much, yeah. And then when you talk about the history of the Homestake, running steam locomotives underground is not good for for many reasons. But then in 1901, the Homestake commissioned some of the first commercial underground compressed air locomotives for use. There's a lot of those still in existence that have been preserved.
Well, and I'll tell you, I've seen those Homestake locomotives. I have found them in Butte. I've seen them in Billings. I've seen them down in Colorado Springs. I've seen them up in Cripple Creek as well.
Yep.
We got still a couple local.
Yep.
There's one on display at the not museum. One on display at the college down in Rapid City, SDSMT.
Yep. And at one point in the near future, hopefully near future, one that has been acquired by the South Dakota State Railroad Museum and or cars that were used underground will be on display here at the museum.
Yeah, and I think that's gonna be a fantastic exhibit that people will be able to stop in year round to see as well.
That's right. Yeah.
So you can go get your picture taken on an actual locomotive.
That's right. That's right. And one of just a handful that were ever built for that
Yep.
service.
And what I really like about those little homestake engines, it's not just that they're old and that they're a piece of history, but you can walk around them. I've never seen a sign anywhere that says "Don't climb on one of those things." It's just a big air tank, really.
It really is. It really is. I mean, some of them have cabs on them, but the majority of them are just, they're open air locomotives because they ran both underground and above ground. And just really a remarkable piece of machinery.
We're going to have to probably do like a 2 or 3 part episode, I'd say, just on that.
I think so.
Got to write down notes here. Oh, I forgot a notepad. Well, we'll forget it. No.
Somebody will remind us.
We'll remind it. We're going to remind ourselves. That's right.
Remind us.
Because we both want to listen to this afterwards.
Yes.
So. See, there's so many different opportunities here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The opportunities are limitless because I say almost daily, I have a passion for the railroads of South Dakota because what they have done for us as a state. And the one thing that I try and stress too is there's good, there's bad, and there's other things that people just don't even think about when it comes to railroads. And we like to try and keep that fresh in people's minds. Because, there are some people that have really bad memories and experiences with railroads. That's with any transportation or anything else. But there's so many people that have good experiences. And there's some people that don't even think about them on a day-to-day basis because they don't realize how important they still are to us today. But that's why we try and educate people about their impacts. And just why these things are still relevant.
Yeah. I was going to say here, we got, we're 42 minutes in.
Shall we do 3 more and call it good at 45?
I think we should try something in that area.
Okay.
Because I know we got maybe 20 minutes on the SD card.
Oh, yeah.
Fingers crossed. I hope you're still there. We're not doing 2 takes of this.
No kidding. I don't think I can do another
It's going to have to be replaced with like pencil drawings of us or something.
Yes. I have crayons at home.
Oh, perfect. We're set.
That's right.
Oh, well, I do think our audio is going fantastic. I've been floating it around a little bit. So
okay, cool.
You might notice some fluctuations when we're hearing it back, but I think overall we should be pretty solid on that.
Well, I'll tell you what, you have done a great job on this, and I appreciate all your work on it.
Well, so let's go with one more question here. So let's bring it up more to the present. Let's go all the way to the beginning of the museum itself.
Okay.
So I'd say I think it's worth it on this inaugural episode. Let's just have you explain a little bit, call it 3, 4, 5 minutes, give or take. How did this whole museum start? And you explained a little bit how you got into the role, but just some of the key points there, because we're, 15, 16 years in now?
We'll be starting year 16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we need water.
Hydrate. How did it start? Some folks here in Hill City decided that they wanted to have a railroad museum in conjunction with everything else. Hill City kind of had a railroad theme about it because of the 1880 train, which was founded here in 1957. And the first run was August of 1958. There was always an intent to have a museum of some kind, a railroad museum, somewhere either here in Hill City or somewhere along the line.
Mm-hmm.
That hadn't happened by the mid 1990s. So several people got together, incorporated a 501c3. I personally didn't get involved. I was asked because of my writing of books and doing history and all that in 2003, and I was just overjoyed to think about doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people contributed money, myself included, to do a feasibility study about where would be the perfect place in South Dakota to do something like this.
And it turns out it's right next to a heritage railway is the perfect place. Who'd have thunk?
Let's just say it worked out very well.
Yes.
But I mean, everything pointed to Hill City.
Mm-hmm.
We happened to be 12 miles from a couple of guys, 4 guys on a mountain that bring in 3 million people a year. We happen to be on a mountain that portrays the courage and heritage of the Lakota. This is a destination. We had a heritage railroad. They decided, the board, that they needed to get a curator that could put something like this together and knew the subject.
I'll tell you, they found one hell of a pick, I think. First round draft pick here.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'm not going to compare myself to John Elway, but that's I didn't wear my Broncos cap today.
You say that, but you know what? In the realm of what you're good at when it comes to the museum and the railroads and whatever, I don't think anybody else could really compete. Like law of averages, maybe there's 1 or 2 people out there. Well, I haven't met them yet.
Nobody is irreplaceable in a lot of cases. I think I brought a unique set of skills, and I certainly brought the passion, because it's something I have always, as we've talked about, something I've always loved, something I have always been fairly proficient at, and we had a good group of people helping me.
Oh yes.
I mean, like I said one other time, I think on this, there is no I in team.
And there's more names than I can even think of or remember.
And that is just in our board members, and then our volunteers, our members, our supporters from around the nation. We have a good product. We have always had a good product. We have the perfect location, and I'll use it one more time. I am blessed to be in this position.
Yeah. Very much so. Well, and now you get to take us into the next phase or chapter or generation or whatever you want to call it when it comes into this museum. So we're 15 years in.
Yeah.
Going on 16. I feel like we're going to get into 20, maybe even 30.
I feel fortunate. And I'm anxious to see what the next 5 to 10 years do for us. Yeah. Because I just we've done some remarkable things, and we've done them in South Dakota. A lot of people don't always give us the credit I think we're due, but yet that's not a bad thing. Yep. Being the underdog is not always a bad thing. It keeps you humble, and it keeps you trying harder.
Oh yeah. Well, and now you'll be able to see us moving forward as well if this whole project takes off. So we're hoping to get a few episodes out a year at least, see what happens with it. I feel like once all the hiccups were through, this went pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't lose my cool. I didn't say any words that can't be.
The tables are still in the right position. The chairs are okay.
Nobody threw a rock through the window.
Nothing's on fire.
That's important.
I hope. Well, check on Bob.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so I think we're going to have to close it out right about here before we run out of space on the SD card.
Yes, indeed.
I do hope that anybody who's viewing this for our inaugural episode of the podcast, tell us what you think. You should be able to see this up on YouTube. We do have a YouTube channel that we'll get it up to at some point. Yep. Of course, members of the board, when you watch this, we do hope that you approve on this project. Because I feel like you did a 15-minute introduction without even breaking a sweat.
Well,
now we'll have to work on condensing it a little bit.
That's right.
However, I feel like we match you up with some great guests that are coming on here. You put me back behind the camera where I belong.
Nah.
Because I got the face for radio. Everybody knows that.
So do I.
Maybe we do stick with the one camera setup.
Yeah, it might
we'll push it way far back, so it's just 2 dots in the distance.
Way back.
Well, folks, thank you very much for joining in, and thank you, Rick, for being a part of this. We'll see what we can do with it.
Thank you, James.
Hey, thank you. And happy trails to everybody. We'll have to work on an outro.
Happy trails?
I don't know.
Happy rails.
Happy rails?
We'll Good
happy rails.
Grief. Wow. You have to teach these people everything.
I know. I fumbled that one, didn't I?
I know you're in education.
I know. All I do is fail upwards, Rick. It's the story of my life.
Hey, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good one. On behalf of the South Dakota State Railroad Museum, thank you so much for tuning in and for your continued support. If you'd like this video and want to see more content from us, please check out the links in the description and subscribe to our channel. This is James Wilmus signing off. Take care.